sampling. Okay, so let's say that we have column A for the number of accountants that we have. We use the accounting numbers to represent or label them. And then for column B, uh, this is the field of their work. Okay, so we have 4 groups here: auditing, forensic, private accounting, and public accounting. Okay, so there are few steps that we have to complete. So the number of population per stratum, the number of samples per stratum, and the number of samples, of course. Okay, so let's complete first column E. So number of population per stratum. So all you have to do is to count the number of accountants from the corresponding field of work. Okay, let's say for example in auditing we have 50. Okay, so input 50 here. And then for forensic we have 51 to 120, so that gives us 40. 70 I mean. Okay, so next private accounting we have 121 to 160 and 161 to 200 for private and public accounting respectively, so that gives us 40 each. Okay, so now we're going to get the number of samples per stratum, but before this we have to get the percentage on how many number of samples per stratum shall we get. Okay, so first let's have the summation of this one. Okay, so the total number of population or the total population size, and then let's use column D to indicate our percentage. Okay, so to do this you insert a formula. So this one, number of population per stratum divided by 200. Okay, so we want it to become a fixed reference, so we're going to put the dollar symbol and click enter. Then we can double click this one so that we can get the percentage for the rest of the cells. After which we're going to get the number of samples per stratum. So how many shall we get from auditing, how many shall we get from the forensic, and so on. Okay, so equal sign, and then we just get the product of these two. Okay, so the percent and the number of population per stratum. So this one times this. Okay, then you can double click this one. Okay, so now that we have the number of samples per stratum, okay, so let me change the color first so that we're going to be guided. Okay, blue, then yellow, and green. Okay, so now that we have this, we're going to get our corresponding samples from each field. Okay, let's say let's have first the samples from auditing. So we need 13 samples out of 50. Okay, so from the data tab and then data analysis, you use sampling function, then click OK. For the input range, you're just going to select the corresponding accountants from this field. Okay, then the random, okay, random sampling, and then number of samples we need 13, and then output range, let's say we want to put it here. Okay, so these are the 13 samples that we have to get from the auditing field. Okay, so let's label them with color orange. Okay, next we'll do the same thing in getting the samples from the forensic department. Okay, so data, then data analysis, sampling, then click OK. Then for the input range, let's change them to the forensic. Okay, and then the number of samples that we need are 25. Okay, so let's change this to 25. And then for the output range, let's say that we're choosing this one. Then click OK. And then we can highlight them with blue. Okay, after that, let's do the same thing to private accounting. sampling, then click OK. Change the input range to the corresponding accountants from private accounting. Okay, and then number of samples we need are 8 samples, and then the output range, let's just choose this one, this cell. Okay, then click OK. So there we have it. And then let's highlight them in yellow. Lastly, let's have data analysis for public accounting, sampling, click OK. Change the input range to public accounting. Okay, number of samples is also 8 because they are both the same, no? And then for the output range, they're both 20%. Let's choose this one and then highlight it in green. Okay, so that is an example of stratified sampling. Okay, stratified sampling is getting samples from each stratum. Okay, so given the number of strata, you have first to get the number of population, then get the percentage or the percent that you need to get as your samples per stratum. Okay, and then you do the same thing as to random sampling. Okay, now we proceed with cluster sampling. Okay, so let's say that we have the following data. So for column A, the accountants. For column B, the company where they work. And then for column C, let's say their team or their group. Okay, so in the company, we have 2 companies here, company A and company B. And then for the groups, we have 15 groups and we have 75 accountants. Okay, let's say that we have these groups already. Let me change this to 15. Okay, so that it won't be biased to or unfair to group 15. Okay, let's say that we have their companies and their groups, okay, or the clusters that we're dealing with. Okay, for this one, you're just going to use a function, the run between, okay, so that it will randomly choose your cluster. Okay, let's say that out of 15 clusters or groups, we're going to make use of 4 clusters as our samples. Okay, so equal sign and then run between function. Okay, and then you have 2 parameters in here. So for the 2 parameters, you just have to indicate the number of groups that you have. So in here we have 1 to 15, so 1 to 15, so that it will choose between those numbers. Okay, once you enter this one, a number will appear. Okay, so let's say that we're going to make use of the number 1 to represent our samples or to indicate our samples. Okay, so enter. So group 11 was chosen, so let's say that that is 1. Okay, it's one of our samples. Okay, once you enter again, a number will appear. So group 3 or cluster 3 was chosen also, and then 7, and then 3 again. So when this happens, you just have to skip another number or choose another number. You skip it, no, because you cannot use the samples twice. Okay, so run between, okay, until you get a different number. Okay, so now that we have 4 groups or 4 clusters as our samples, we're going to go back to their worksheet for us to be able to identify our samples. Okay, so this means that all the accountants from these groups are chosen as our samples. Okay, so 3, group 3, 6, 7, and 11. Let me type them. 3, 6, 7, and 11. Okay, and then we can copy this one. Then let's just paste it here. Okay, so let's use number 1 to denote our samples here. Okay, so let's say that all the accountants from group 3 are chosen. Okay, and then all the accountants from group 6 as well as group 7, and lastly for group 11. Okay, so these are our samples for the study. Okay, or for this specific example. Okay, so the difference between stratified and cluster sampling is that in cluster sampling, we choose the entire group, whereas in stratified sampling, we are getting samples from specific groups. Okay, so you don't get the entire population from the group. Instead, you just get samples in it. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much.